Thank you for this introduction. I'm David Ruprecht, and this is joint work with Katharina Kohls, Thorsten Holz, and Christina Pepper. So the first 3 hours are from Ruhr University Bochum, and Christina is from NYU Abu Dhabi. So yeah, it's about LTE, and we use LTE on a daily basis. So it is expected that we have, of the world population, 75% are using LTE in 2020 on a daily basis. And we use it for various scenarios, for chatting with our friends or phoning with our parents. So we need to secure the communication, in particular the radio communication between your phone and the network. So LTE has some standard security aims, like mutual authentication between your phone and the network, traffic confidentiality that secures the connection or does encryption, and some special aims like identity and location confidentiality. To reach the security aims, we have first initial authentication and key agreement protocol that establish mutual authentication between your phone and the network, and also a common key. This common key is used for ongoing security measures and secure the connection. We want to have a closer look today at what kind of security is implemented in the security connections, in particular, where is this implemented and what kind of security measures are implemented. And this brings me to the layer 2 of LTE. This is a data link layer, and here are the security implemented for the radio layer connection. In particular, the PDCP subprotocol implements the security here. We need to know that there's no security measures below this layer, and we want to know what kind of security measures are implemented at the PDCP. First, we need to separate our data in two kind of planes. So we have a control plane. This is LTE-specific traffic, like when we hand over from one cell to another. This is done by the control plane. And we have user plane traffic. That is basically your raw IP data when we want to access a website or do some TV streaming. So on both planes, we have encryption, and we have integrity protection only on the control plane and not on the user plane. So today I want to talk about 3 major attacks that can happen on layer 2. First of all, I want to do an identity mapping attack, which allows us to use a public identifier and map it down to the radio identity. We have metadata on layer 2 that allows website fingerprinting, and I want to introduce the alter attack, which allows us to redirect the victim to a malicious website due to missing integrity protection. So first I want to start with an identity mapping. This allows us to use a public identity to map down to the radio identity. So we have certain different identities in LTE. First, we have the public identity of the victim. For example, the phone number of your friend, and it's basically lifelong. You might change it, but you will at least give your friends your new phone number. So, and it's basically on layer 8, so we can identify each other from UE, which is the phone in LTE, to UE. Then we have the permanent identity, which is called IMSI, and this is only private between your phone and the core network. So there should be no attacker available of this IMSI. We have also for privacy reasons, we have also already some temporary identity called TIMSI. And related work has already shown that we can basically map the phone number of the UE to the IMSI and even down to the temporary identity. We have a third LTE-specific identity, which is the radio identity. This is called RNTI. And this is only active during an active radio connection. So only when you send active data to the radio connection, the RNTI is used and associated with your phone and the data. So as I said earlier, we have already seen some related work where we can map the phone number to the IMSI and map the phone number to the TIMSI. What we want to show you today is how to map the TIMSI to the RNTI, which is used on layer 2. And the idea is quite simple. So when our phone wants to connect to a phone, it initiates a radio connection. The E node B, or the base station of the network, assigns us, or the phone, an RNTI. To be precise, this is called CRNTI, which is used only for this radio connection. To let the user or the network know who we actually are, we use a TIMSI. And we can now use an uplink sniffer on this message to link the CRNTI with a TIMSI. However, uplink sniffing in LTE is difficult. I would say it's not impossible, but you really need good hardware equipment to do synchronization on the radio layer, and in particular, the timing advance is quite difficult here. However, there's one specification problem, I would say, that allows us to use also a downlink sniffer, because the E node B sends back the TIMSI for collision avoidance during the first phase of this thing. So we did this and in a commercial network, and we see this is actually possible. I want now to present you the website fingerprinting attack. So once we have learned the CRNTI of a user, we can do website fingerprinting with it. The idea is quite simple, and we know website fingerprinting from other contexts, like Tor or HTTPS website fingerprinting, and we can do it on encrypted traffic. However, it's new to the context of LTE, and we can do it because there is unencrypted layer 2 metadata available in LTE. So the thing is quite easy. So we have a training set where we can learn or pre-record data of visiting website, and then we have an attack phase where we record actually the user traffic and then map both together. So we have a classification attack, and when we guess the site correctly, the attack was successful. So we did this in our work right now as a first proof of concept work in a controlled lab setup and with simple scenarios, and we got a success rate about 95%. And we got also some real-world feasibility studies on a follow-up paper where we did this in a commercial network, where we also look into influencing factors like use browser, use baseband chipset, so if we use an iPhone or an Android device, and how we compare these both together. And I refer here to the paper Lost Traffic Encryption presented last week at WISEC. So I want to now talk about the alter attack. So this is an active attack. So both before ones were passive attacks, and this is a active attack on layer 2, which allows us to redirect the victim to a malicious website, for example. We have 3 components of this attack. First of all, we can modify the plain text. The man-in-the-middle attack is what we are kind of using as an active attacker in this scenario. And one example of this is DNS spoofing. I want to first introduce you the plain text modification in LTE. As I said earlier, there's no integrity protection to the user plane. And this happens on the PDCP layer. However, the traffic is encrypted. So we want to now look how the traffic is actually encrypted in LTE, in particular for the user plane. We need to know that the PDCP protocol encrypts the whole IP packet. So there is no IP header left that can be used at the attacker's side. We use a stream cipher mainly in commercial networks. This is often AES in counter mode to do a simple stream cipher where we XOR the key stream with the plain text and get the ciphertext out of it. The sender sends now the ciphertext, and this might intercept it by an active attacker. The active attacker can now modify the ciphertext by simply XORing some mask on it and forward the manipulated ciphertext to the receiver. The receiver has now means to control any modification of the ciphertext, and also decrypts it with the exact same key stream as the sender did. So we got the manipulated plain text that has the same bit flips in the plain text as introduced by the attacker with the mask. The interesting fact is that we can now basically do a known plaintext attack where we have the plaintext and deterministically get the manipulated plaintext out of it by simply XORing the wanted plaintext with the known plaintext. I want now to introduce the active man in the middle. Obviously, we need an active man in the middle to intercept these messages, and for LTE, this was the tricky part. So I want to give you a rough idea of the requirements and want not to go into detail of the implementation. So first of all, the active man in the middle needs to act as an E-node B towards the victim, towards the phone, and act as UE, so as phone, to the commercial network. This all happens on layer 2, and he needs to forward layer 2 frames on both sides. So we implemented such relay with the open source LTE stack of software radio system, which is available on GitHub. And this is actually how our experiment looked like. We put the UE in a shielding box to prevent any interference with any outside commercial network. And we have an E-node B component and the UE component using software-defined radios. We implemented this relay on a normal computer running Linux. So as one example of manipulating the ciphertext, we can perform DNS spoofing attack. The interesting fact on DNS is that the LTE network sets the DNS request or sets the DNS server at the beginning of each connection. So an attacker can easily guess the plaintext of this DNS requests. Further, DNS requests are easily identifiable by its length. So we can easily distinguish between DNS request packets and normal TCP traffic. This is why we choose to use DNS as one target. I will roughly go through the whole process, the attack procedure. In particular, we have on the left side the victim, the relay, the commercial network, and the internet here. So the UE will connect to our relay. So we assume this, but related work has shown this is possible. It's basically a normal IMSI catcher attack, and performs the attach procedure. So the relay forwards all messages, including the AKA. At this time, both entities, so the commercial network and the UE, are mutually authenticated on layer 3. And so there is mutual authentication established between both entities. However, the relay forwards all traffic on layer 2. So there will be one time the UE will send in DNS request and the relay will intercept this DNS request based on a length. It will XOR the mask, and this directs the IP packet to the malicious DNS server. The DNS server, the malicious DNS server, will respond with a DNS spoofing packet towards the UE. However, the relay will also intercept this message and alter the source IP address back to the original DNS destination address, because the UE needs to match the outgoing packet with the incoming packet. All subsequent messages, so in particular the HTTP connection, is directed towards the HTTP server under control of the attacker. So we have done this in a commercial network using a commercial phone with a commercial SIM card with a self-built relay, and we were able basically to redirect the victim which want to go to a website. We used Hotmail as one example, to a malicious to a normal website, redirected to a malicious website where we basically could steal the credentials. The question is how we can prevent this attack, obviously with integrity protection, and in particular on the user plane. LTE is now fully deployed, fully specified, and we all use it. So to be honest, it will be unlikely that there will any change on LTE. However, 5G, the upcoming promising new radio technology, is still under specification for certain parts, and it will be rolled out soon. So there is still optional integrity protection on the user plane, and early implementations might have limited support of this integrity protection on the user plane. So the attack vector remains open in current and maybe also for future generations. I would come now to my conclusion. First, I've shown you an identity mapping attack where we can match the public identity to the radio identity. Website fingerprinting was possible because we have unencrypted metadata in LTE. And third, I showed you the alter attack, which allows the redirection of a user to a malicious website. I'm David Ruprecht from Ruhr University Bochum, and I'm happy to answer you any questions.
All right, any questions? Just please come to the microphones in the walkway. I have the pleasure of getting to ask the first question. So we've seen a few papers over the course of this conference and over time over looking at, for instance, like HTTPS everywhere, at true end-to-end authentication. Yeah. Like, does that factor in at all in terms of defenses? Like, why wouldn't that have, for instance, identified maybe the user in the attack that you had demonstrated?
So the question is if there are upper layer countermeasures against it. Yeah, obviously there are. For example, you can use HTTPS with secure cookie policy and so on. However, I think we have seen that also attacks on this layer can happen. So what my idea of a secure communication system is that we have from the ground on a secure connection that one layer fail, for example, LTE, we have another layer of protection against it. So yeah, that's why we kind of request also integrity protection needed on the user plane.
That's great.
Tom Benjamin, Perspective Labs. I've got a question about the number one there, the identity mapping. Could you pop back in your slides?
I hope, yes, I can.
I know it's way back in the slideshow. But I was just interested in the link between the TMSI and the RINTI. Yeah. I might not have been understanding what you're saying, which is why I wanted to.
It might take a while until I'm.
I apologize.
But you can ask.
So the question I was going to be asking is right there with the okay. So this is for the collision avoidance. Yeah. But earlier, were you saying that you are at least for this way of identifying the user's RINTI, that you're expecting that you know the TMSI?
Yes, and so we are thinking about, so the attacker model is like, you know the TIMSI from previous attacks, and then can link the TIMSI to the RNTI. However, we saw some related work that, for example, the TIMSI is not really allocated in a random way, and the RNTI is not allocated in a random way, like there's subsequent numbers. And so the problem of here is having not randomized identities along with mapping identities not in a non-deterministic way or in a deterministic way.
Okay, good. That was going to be my question, was whether we were assuming that the TMSI was not going to have good randomness.
Yes.
So I see. So we're saying that this is an implementation problem rather than a protocol problem.
Yes, I think it always depends on implementation and specifications. So there is a specification who says, okay, the NTI, the TIMSI needs to be randomized sufficiently, but there's the Guti reallocation paper presented last or the year before, I don't know.
Yeah, that was my only question, whether it was specification or implementation.
Both.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, let's thank our speaker once more.